All right. So we're so excited to welcome everybody here for our July Plants, Pests, and Pathogens. And today we're really getting ready and excited about the Great Southeast Pollinator Census, which is coming up in August. So I'll have some opening announcements and just give you a little background about the Great Southeast Pollinator Census. Then Matt Bertone will give us an insect ID refresher that'll make sure we're all prepared to observe and identify insects and record them in the proper categories during the pollinator census. And we will finish up with our BOLOs, or Be on the Lookout, where Matt and Mike will share insect pests and plant diseases that are likely to be occurring in landscapes and gardens across the state in the next month. And Caroline will close us out with some Extension Master Gardener program announcements. So welcome everybody today. We are glad to have you here, and we are super thrilled to announce that registration for Extension Master Gardener College is now open. This will be held in September, the 24th through the 26th. The first day is optional pre-conference tours. You can join, or you can just come to the main conference, which is the 25th and 26th. And that part, the main conference, will be held on Centennial Campus, NC State Centennial Campus at Hunt Library, which is in Raleigh. So we'd love to see all of you there. Our theme is growing healthy plants, pollinators, and people. And we encourage you to check out all the information that is posted on the EMG College website. Okay, before I hand it over to Matt, I'm just going to give a little background about the Great Southeast Pollinator Census. If you've never heard of it, it's probably because last year was the first year it was ever held in North Carolina. So it's a pretty new opportunity for us here in the state. It is a citizen science project, and it invites people of all ages. So anybody can participate in this. It's not limited to Master Gardener volunteers. It can be youth, it can be adults. So anybody you know and you meet could be part of this. And what they're asked to do is collect data on pollinator population levels and diversity. I'll tell you just a little bit more about what that looks like in the next slide, or in the next few slides. But the goal of the Great Southeast Pollinator Census is to provide data that scientists can use to monitor pollinator populations and develop strategies to help protect pollinators. The data is available on the Great Southeast Pollinator Census website. And there's even some, I think, articles that cited on the site that have used this data. The other really important goal of this is to educate and inspire people to protect pollinators. So just by getting out and looking what's out there and learning a little bit more about the diversity of pollinators, that can really inspire people to then want to protect them and just increase their awareness of pollinators and their importance. So there's all kinds of opportunities here to make this a wonderful educational event. And as I mentioned, North Carolina first held this in 2023, and that was in great part thanks to Amanda Bratcher. She was Amanda Wilkinson. She is the horticulture agent in Lee County, and she played a very important role in bringing the Great Southeast Pollinator Census to North Carolina, as well as Master Gardener volunteers across the state played a huge role in establishing it and submitting data last year and really getting it off to a good start in North Carolina. But the event itself comes from Georgia, and Becky Griffin is I think one of the entomology extension specialists there. This was her idea. She started it in Georgia in 2017 with a smaller group of counties, and it really went statewide in Georgia in 2019. And since then, you can see other states in the Southeast have been coming on and joining every year. So that's really exciting to see it growing and spreading across the Southeast. So there are different ways you can participate. You can just do it individually from your own home. That is a wonderful way to participate. And you can get an hour of volunteer service for doing that. You can also just help spread the word, let others know about it, encourage other people you know to participate. You can post information about it on your Facebook page, your Extension Master Gardener Facebook page, so you can just help get the word out for other people to participate from their backyards. And then if you really want to take it to the next level, you can host some type of educational event either on the census dates or before it. So we'll just look a little bit at what those look like. So hold on just a minute. I'm thinking I might have a slide skipped. For some reason, I must have accidentally deleted a slide. So my first slide was supposed to talk about how you could participate individually, and it was going to show you this recording sheet, which you would use, and it would say all you need to do to participate individually is find a plant that pollinators are visiting, then on the dates of the pollen of the census, which are the I believe the 23rd and 24th this year, you would go observe that plant just for 15 minutes. So this is not something that's going to take all day. You would observe it for 15 minutes and watch the insects that visit that plant. And each time one of them lands on it, you would record it on this data sheet. And these are the categories. So it's not like you're trying to get really nitty gritty down to the species or, very detailed what this is. It's just, is it a carpenter bee? Is it a bumblebee? Is it a honeybee? And Matt is going to share tips with us today on how to distinguish those, as well as wasps, flies, butterflies, and moths, and other insects. So it doesn't take a long time, and it doesn't require a lot of insect ID expertise. But it is certainly something you could really get into observing these insects and enjoying their activity and the diversity of different pollinators that are in your landscape. So the other way you can do this individually. We have this set up on the EMG intranet where you can sign up, and you can also get that volunteer service hour for your participation individually. You can help spread the word through social media, just individually, or through the Extension Master Gardener program, working with your agent in your county. Y'all can get the word out through articles, through different ways that you are educating the public about gardening. So it's wonderful to help encourage other people to participate. And there are resources on the Great Southeast Pollinator Census website that include a social media kit. So you don't have to start from scratch. And it's great to be able to show impact. It's always good. And now that we have done the Great Southeast Pollinator Census for a year, you can actually go to the website and find the data of how many people participated in your county last year. Then the activities you undertake this year to promote the event and get more people involved, you'll actually be able to look at this year's data when it gets posted later in the year and see how much of an increase there was in people participating in your county. There's a lot of great resources as well on the official Great Southeast Pollinator Census website. And then Amanda Bratcher has also posted a lot of information about the Great Southeast Pollinator Census in North Carolina specifically on the extension website for Lee County. So there's a link here. And of course, all of these links will be part of the follow-up resources you receive. And the third thing you can do is host an educational event. So this could be a class, a workshop, a tour. This is something you could do before the dates of the census. You could help people learn about pollinators and why they're important and the different types. You could have a class on creating a pollinator garden. Then on the dates of the census, you could do the same thing, classes, tours, workshops, or you could hold a public counting event using your demonstration garden or another public site where there are plants pollinators are likely to be visiting, and you can encourage people to participate and come and join in and be part of a community event. So we have talked about this quite a bit, and we have some great resources where you can get more information and get inspiration. Just recently, back in June, we held a buzz session where we went into a little more detail about the different types of things you can do to support the pollinator census. And then folks shared, Master Gardener volunteers from around the state shared what they are doing and planning in their county this year. So I encourage you to check that out. You can also go and view the recording from our Learn, Grow, Share showcase back in April, which featured counties, Master Gardener volunteers and agents from counties that held public events last year. So they told all about what they did and gave tips and you know, how it was received. So this would be a great way if you're thinking about an event this year or even planning ahead to next year to get inspiration. So again, that recording will be part of the follow-up resources. And we want you to save the date. Amanda Bratcher is going to be holding a statewide webinar on August 15th. So it will be open to the public. It will be part information about how to participate, part learning experience about pollinators, and third part just inspiration and getting excited about being part of the Great Southeast Pollinator Census. So more information of that will be posted on the extension website for Lee County very soon. So we encourage you to participate in any one of those three ways. Any way you can participate will help pollinators. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Dr. Matt Bertone, who needs no introduction. He's with us every month. He is the director of the NC State Plant Disease and Insect Clinic, the entomologist. He does the insect ID. He is an amazing photographer, and we really benefit from his amazing photography in our webinars as he shares the beautiful pictures he takes of insects. So he is going to give us an insect ID refresher. And with that, Matt, I will stop sharing my screen so you can start your share and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Charlotte. Thanks for the introduction and all that great information about this project. So I'm going to talk to you today about some pollinators. Let me share my screen. Let's see. All right, hopefully everyone can see that well. And I'm going to talk to you today about pollinators, of course. And this is one of the kinds of benefits that insects provide to plants. And of course, pollen is a really good resource for insects as well. And of course, the nectar that attracts them. Really pollinators are kind of on a spectrum. So anything that visits a flower technically is a potential pollinator, especially if it goes to another flower of the same species and can pollinate. And different plants require different types of pollination, but really lots of different things are on flowers and lots of different things can carry pollen, so technically they can be pollinators. Some are obviously better than others at pollinating plants. In fact, I don't talk about it here, but today. But the yucca moth, not apparently, but the yucca moth is a well-known example of a pollinator that its host plant, the yucca, requires the moth to pollinate its flowers and cannot be pollinated any other way. And the moth gets a benefit by some of its larvae eating some of the seeds of the plant. And so the plant sacrifices those seeds to have this really good pollinator. And with that, some critters visit lots of different flowers. They're not very selective, while others only visit specific plants or only a couple types of plants. Some steal nectar and look like they're pollinating. For instance, carpenter bees can commonly do this. They'll poke a hole in the side of the flower and feed on the nectar. So even though without getting to the pollen, so even though it may look like they may be pollinating or they're a bee, they actually are stealing nectar. And the more pollen the organism collects, the more successful it is for the plants, of course. Of course, if you're an insect that relies on the pollen, the more pollen you collect, the better you are, or the better your offspring are off. So the one group that people think about when they think about pollinators is, of course, bees. And so bees are a type of insect, a type of wasp, technically. They're in the order Hymenoptera. They are a specialized group of vegetarian wasps. They actually evolved from hunting wasps. And they began to start collecting pollen. And you can see a lot of these are covered in pollen. They have pollen on the legs, which many of them collect in pollen in special organs or on their legs, on their belly, places like that, which then they can take it back to their nest. They rub it off and pack it into balls, which then their larvae feed on as they develop. Pollen is, of course, very protein rich, so it's a really good food source. But of course, while they're doing this, they're also dropping pollen on the plants they're visiting. And so here's just kind of a smattering of some bees you might see out there. And just to give you their names, so carpenter bees, although people don't like them because they bore into homes and decks and places like that, they are actually pollinating plants, pollinating flowers. Because they're a bee, they require pollen to feed. Little carpenter bees actually don't bore into wood, but they nest in the piths of in the stems of plants. You heard about that, I think, last session. There are lots of different little sweat bees. These will come to humans and drink the sweat. That's why they call that. But they are very common pollinators, as are the typical social bees, the honeybees and the bumblebees. Honeybee, of course, is a non-native insect, but it has been brought here because of its good production of honey, and it's a very good pollinator as well. But bumblebees are native groups of social bees, often nesting in the ground or in rodent burrows or bird boxes, things like that. So all bees all feed on pollen and nectar, and develop on that. But like I said, bees are wasps. Technically, they're in the Hymenoptera, and that means that there are also other wasps that come to flowers that feed on the nectar that can be potential pollinators. And so here's some examples of some wasps that you'll see at flowers. So scoliid wasps, some hunting wasps, yellow jackets, and paper wasps, these social wasps. Even other ones that people have probably never heard of, like gasteropteid wasps, which are actually sometimes called carrot wasps because they often go to composite carrot or the umbelliferous flowers like Queen Anne's lace and others of the members of the carrot family. And here's a cuckoo wasp, which is actually a parasite of other wasps. It goes in and it eats the larvae and the stores of other wasps as a larva, but they also will come to the plants to feed on the nectar and can be picking up pollen. And you can see here the scoliid wasp, which is actually a parasite of scarab beetles like Japanese beetle and stuff like that. You can see it's covered in pollen here, and if it goes and visits another goldenrod, it's going to transfer that pollen to the next one. Ants are also specific, technically a type of wasp. They're just another social wasp. Often they live underground, but they do obviously go out and forage on different food sources. And many ants prefer sugary liquids. Some ants are more predators or more omnivores, but a lot of them will preferentially take nectar to feed to boost of energy. So adult wasps, because including ants, because they have this very narrow, thin wasp waist, they can't actually eat solid food. So nectar is a huge resource for them to get energy because it's this liquid sugar, kind of like a soda fountain, so they can get this extra energy to go do what they need to do. And so here's all these little black ants that are inside this dandelion. They're very happy in there feeding, heads down. One popped its head up, of course. And these are some larger meadow ants or mound ants that are on top of this flower. So I talked about these wasps and how do you know what's a bee and what's a true wasp and hopefully you can tell what the ants are. But how do you know it's a true bee? So bees are characterized first by having branched hairs. So this is what distinguishes them from other wasps. Now, you usually have to see it under the scope, but basically here's a close-up photo I took of the hind leg of a bee. You can see here's another example of a similar bee that has its leg coated in pollen. That's because these branched hairs, they look like little Christmas trees almost, are very good at holding the pollen because they've got more surface area, they've got more of those spikes. And so this is a modification in bees that it allows them to be such good pollinators. Um, Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to see that very well, even especially with the naked eye, even with binoculars, things like that. But you may catch a glimpse of it. And unfortunately, too, that some bees are very wasp-like. They're very bare. They don't have a lot of hair there. Although if you were to look up close at these hairs, they will be branched like other bees, because again, that's a characteristic of this whole group. But in this case, for instance, these mast bees, these Hyleas, which are very wasp-like, they confuse me a lot actually for hunting wasps. Another characteristic to look for is that the first segment of the hind foot is wider, much wider than the second segment. Here it's a very barely wider. It's only a little bit wider, but in many bees, if we go back, many bees, it's much wider. You can see here than the first segment. Now, hopefully you can see that. There may be, I'm betting that I'm betting that some people are going to confuse some of the wasps for bees and vice versa. And of course, we're going to get into the flies in a second, many of which are bee mimics and wasp mimics. So that's going to be even more difficult sometimes. But again, there are other bees, little bees. So not all bees are big or like bumblebees or honeybees. They come in various sizes and shapes, colors, metallic to black to other colors. So keep an eye out for them, and hopefully you can distinguish the bees from the true wasps, and then the ants are hopefully a little bit easier. Okay, so next is flies. So flies are a really important group of pollinators. In fact, I think I've studied flies a lot in the past, and in fact, they're one of my favorite groups of insects. Most of the time, when you say fly, people get freaked out or that it's grossed out. But people don't realize that flies are hugely important pollinators and are super diverse out there. And in fact, recent studies have kind of highlighted the fact that not only are flies really good pollinators, but they're amazing in that because they have larvae that perform other services like decomposition and things like that, they are performing double duty. They're not only pollinating plants, but they're also feeding on dead animals or dead compost. They're helping compost the materials in your compost bin, and so they're actually extra beneficial. And whereas again, bees, not to put them down, but they really just feed on the pollen. That's what their larvae do. So they're really only doing associated with pollen and flowers. So here's a picture of a typical muscoid fly. This is the fly-like fly that most people think about, although I will mention that a lot more flies are also more of the midge-like and mosquito-like insects, so a lot more gangly, less compact. So here's some characteristics of flies that you're going to look out for. So flies are in the order Diptera, that literally means die for two, and ptera, wing, it means two-winged, because they have two fully developed wings, and then they have these hind wings that are reduced into these club-like organs called halteres. And those are used to gyroscopically balance them in flight. A couple other things about flies. For the most part, almost all flies have soft mouth parts. So they have these sponging mouth parts that they use to suck on liquids. Now, of course, nectar is liquid. They will even consume a little bit of pollen as they're feeding on it. But for the most part, they're eating liquid diets. And one distinguishing characteristic, especially for some of the more confusing ones that are bee mimics or wasp mimics, is the fact that flies often have short antennae. Now, this isn't always the case, but many times, and a lot of the very common fly-like flies have this antenna called an aristate antenna. And so basically, this is actually a fully formed antenna that is then been modified into these very thick basal parts, and then the rest of the antenna has turned into this little hair-like process called an arista. And you can see that here. You can see the little club, kind of this part of the antenna, and then off it comes the arista, which isn't just a hair, it's actually the rest of the antenna. So take a look at flies. If you see them, look out for this, because this is going to be a very good characteristic to look for. Another thing is the wing venation of flies versus wasps. So the wing veins and flies are typically very elongate and parallel. Their cells, these little cells, which are the little spaces bound by veins, are typically elongate. Whereas in many wasps, of course, this doesn't hold true for all. In many wasps, they have a lot of kind of blocky cells in the wing with these very kind of grid-like almost wing venation. Again, that's not 100% true all the time. There's lots of little tiny wasps that have very little wing venation. Same with flies that have more or less wing venation. But again, only one pair of wings in the flies and two pairs of wings in the bees and wasps. Also note that in the bees and wasps, the wings unite. They actually have these little hooks on the foredge of the hind wing. They hook to the forewing. This couples the wings. So sometimes if they're flying or they're there and spread out, it may look like they only have one wing, but make sure you recognize that there are two wings actually there. They're just connected by some hooks. Now here's some flies visiting flowers. So you have a lot of bee flies. Many of them do actually look like bees. These are less so. Here's a polliniid fly. This is formerly a blowfly, but they're in the genus Pollenia. I don't know. I don't think that has to do with the fact that they're feeding on nectar and pollen. These actually parasitize earthworms as larvae, but I think it's based on this kind of golden crinkly hair they have on them. There are other types of flies. Here just happens to be a septic fly, but you can find lots of little fly-like flies on flowers. Here's a soldier fly, which is not only a wasp mimic, but it also has these long antennae that are also helping to produce that wasp-like look. But again, you're only going to see these two wings here, certain type of wing venation. This might be one where you're really on the edge. Is it a wasp? Is it a fly? This is one where you might want to take some photos and compare it with some things just to look at the details. But anyway, there are a lot of wasp-like flies out there, and I'm going to show you a few more in a minute. And then these are true fruit flies, not the fruit flies that you see in your kitchen, but the true fruit flies are ones that feed on plant material, live plant material as larvae. Many of them feed on fruits as larvae, where they bore into the fruit. But a lot of the species around actually feed on flowers. And in fact, in this flower head, you can see those are some of the maggots of some of these flies. So they actually bore into the flowers. So not only adults feeding on nectar and actually carrying pollen, you can see here, and maybe transferring and pollinating flowers, they also require the flowers to feed as young anyway. Now, mosquitoes, people really don't like, of course. I like some a lot, some I do not like. But mosquitoes are actually good pollinators. They require nectar typically in both sexes. The males will only feed on nectar or sugary substances, whereas the females will obviously feed on human or feed on blood, including humans, often to develop their eggs. But here's a biting, a really pretty, but with the white socks, pretty Seraphora, which does bite humans. And this is on a black-eyed Susan. And then this is one of my favorite mosquitoes. This is a beneficial mosquito, the elephant mosquito. You can tell because of the blue tinge, these blue iridescent scales, and this curved proboscis. And also the large size. These are going to be very large mosquitoes, about the size of your thumbnail. And they are actually beneficial because they feed as larvae on other mosquito larvae, and then they feed enough that the females even don't have to feed on blood to develop eggs. And so they've gotten all the food they need when they're young, and they can come visit the flowers. This is actually a male. Male mosquitoes have these very bottle brush antennae, whereas the females have these antennae with fewer hairs. And then there are other flies that will visit flowers. These are not mosquitoes. They might look like mosquitoes, but they're in fact a fairly rare group of fungus gnats that has this long proboscis. So a lot of long proboscis flies don't have that proboscis to suck blood. They, people mistake them for mosquitoes, like they're going to suck blood. But these long proboscids actually help to access the nectar in flowers. And so these will visit flowers. These are visiting goldenrod, but I've actually observed these in my yard and published on them visiting my viburnums. So it's not just fungus. It's not just big fly-like flies or mosquitoes or things like that. There are other kinds of flies. And in fact, with these, when I caught the specimens, they did have pollen stuck to them. So they are technically a potential pollinator of plants. And of course, this long proboscis is used specifically to suck nectar, so they very commonly visit flowers. And again, you can see here the two wings and these halteres right here, the club-like organs. Now, a huge group of really diverse group of flies that visit flowers are called hover or flower flies, literally in their name. In fact, a lot of people kind of almost all refer to them as flower flies now. But this is a really diverse group of flies. The larvae do all different things. Some feed in dead wood, some are in rotten materials or in really gross sewage. Others are on plants feeding on aphids. So they're really diverse as larvae. The adults are really diverse too and come in all these different forms. Again, many of them look a lot like wasps or bees, but again, you can see here only two wings, very large eyes, short antennae, uh, and they do visit flowers a lot. And this is again probably why they've evolved to look like bees and wasps because those are protected by stingers, and they can then help ward away potential predators by making them confused while they're out and about on flowers. And one of my favorites, of course, this is called the wavy mucksucker. It's a really interesting hoverfly with this really weird, funky pattern in the eye. Really, if you see that, you kind of know what that is. But otherwise, most of these hoverflies are going to have those characteristics of flies: the two wings, the halteres, the short antennae, and the big eyes. Okay, the next group are the butterflies and moths. This is the order Lepidoptera. And lepido meaning scaled, so scaly wing. And that is, of course, the characteristic of moths and butterflies, is that their wings are covered in these modified setae. So these are the hairs on the wings of butterflies and moths. Most have wings that are covered with that. There are a few clear wing moths out there and clear wing butterflies that just have the wing membrane, no actual scales on it. But 90-something%, 99% of the moths and butterflies out there are going to have these scales in these various patterns on their wings. Another characteristic of moths and butterflies is that all, except for one very primitive type of moth that has biting mandibles, all of them have these sucking, siphoning mouth parts. So these actually are interesting. In moths and butterflies, they actually only have a food channel. So basically, it's one part of the mouth part has become very elongate and zippered together, and it creates a food channel. So they don't pierce. They typically don't pierce things. They need access to the open liquids, but it acts as a straw. And basically, they have to suck on liquid diets, and so that's most commonly going to be nectar. They'll also go to puddles, and on riverbanks, they'll go to pools to the on the edges to feed on the liquid and get minerals from it too. And so this will help add to the nutrition. But for the most part, they're going to be feeding on the nectar, although some moths do not feed at all as adults and do not have these mouth parts. So here's a variety of different Lepidoptera visiting flowers. Um, so we've got a zygaenid moth, which is these skeletonized grape leaves often, but there's a huge diversity in them, or not huge. There's a decent diversity in them. A lot of hair streak butterflies. These have these little tails and are often gray or blue in color. Lots of nymphalid butterflies, which includes even the monarchs and those groups, but it's a hugely diverse group of butterflies. You also see a lot of the white butterflies and the sulfur butterflies, a different family of butterflies. This is a snout moth. You can see the little snout right here, but you can actually also see the proboscis going into the flower to suck on the nectar. And this is a plume moth. So plume moths, their wings are divided into little rays, but it's hard to tell here when you see them. These are actually the hind wings, which are shortened, and so they really kind of use these kind of interesting front wings to fly. But again, this is just a small portion of the types of butterflies and moths that will visit flowers, and I'm sure you've all seen them at flowers. One major group that's going to be at flowers, it's a type of butterfly called skippers. Skipper butterflies are really common at flowers. There's a lot of diversity in them. One of my favorite butterflies, if not my favorite butterfly, is the long-tailed skipper here. It's a very large species with this beautiful blue iridescence on it. You get the silver-spotted skippers, which feed on legumes as caterpillars, but are very common at flowers. And then a lot of these little smaller grass skippers that are orange or tan in color. Skipper butterflies are characterized by the very wide head with the very widely separated eyes. And more diagnostic is this hook tip of the antenna. And in fact, you can tell butterflies typically from moths, even though butterflies are technically just a group of day-flying moths, in that their antennae are thin and then they usually have a club at the end. And in skippers, that club is hooked. And so we go back real quick so you can see here's a club at the end of a thin antenna. That's a butterfly club at the end of a thin antenna, club at the end of a thin antenna. This just has a thin antenna, or like a pectinate or comb-like antenna. It's probably going to be a true moth. And we can go back and see also on the swallowtail butterfly that they also have a clubbed antenna. Okay, and finally, the final major group that I'm going to talk about that comes often to flowers are the Coleoptera, the beetles. And Coleoptera, again, translated, we know now that ptera means wing, coleo means sheath or shielded. So that's because Coleoptera, the beetles, typically have leathery or hardened forewings that cover the hind wings. And so we can see in these soldier beetles here, they have very leathery, flexible wings, but they're still hardened and don't look like a typical membranous wing. And then in this wedge-shaped beetle, it's got these really hard elytra, which is the name of that wing covering, technically the front wing. And you can see poking out the back are these membranous hind wings. And this is why they think beetles are very successful in that they can protect their wings, which means they can invade a lot of different environments while still being able to fly and colonize new ones. So here's a smattering of some beetles at flowers. So a lot of scarab beetles come to flowers to feed on the pollen and nectar. You've got this blister beetle who you can see its face is completely full of pollen, so it is really going to town on those flowers. So it's visiting another flower, it's likely to kind of transfer that pollen. You've got sap beetles that are very common in flowers. In fact, this species here, I recently learned, has sometimes larvae that sometimes mine the petals of flowers. So it's very associated with flowers. And these are mostly, this species, I think, is mostly associated with yucca flowers. We've got very tiny little beetles. We've got kind of elongate beetles. They're feeding. You can see it literally feeding on the nectar there. Lots of soldier beetles in the fall. You're going to start seeing a lot of soldier beetles on flowers. They're really common at flowers. Tumbling flower beetles, and a lot of beetles have flower in their common name because they're so commonly associated with them. And tumbling flower beetles are a very common group. They have this very big humpback with a kind of hidden head and a pointed abdomen, and they do tumble off the flowers very quickly when you approach them. So be careful when you're out there doing the census. You may scare away some of these insects. So try and creep up if you can. But yeah, you're going to see these. I guarantee you'll see a few of these on some of the flowers. And you know, kind of to start wrapping up, lots of insects do visit flowers. So it's not just these major groups that I discussed. For instance, here's an earwig that is really happy about this flower and this pollen. Again, pollen is really protein rich, so it's really good for insects to eat. And so this earwig is very happy in the flower, and they also like very tight spaces. So oftentimes you find them in flowers. So they're there. Plant bugs and ebony bugs and all these other types of bugs who will come to flowers as well. They've got piercing sucking mouth parts, so they can actually probe the flower and get to that nectar. And here's some assassin bugs, which are predatory, but hang out on flowers and around flowers as well. And you can see these are covered in pollen, especially because these actually have sticky legs. And that brings me to the final point, is that not everything on a flower is there because of the flower or the pollen or the nectar, but many things come to flowers because of what they'll get out of it. And so here's a smattering of insects that you'll find on flowers. They may not move very far from the flower, may be very mobile. But for instance, we have a thick-headed fly. You can see it's covered in pollen. And so, yeah, it could be transferring pollen, but this is not interested in the flower because of not necessarily, it probably takes some nectar, but really it's not interested in the flower because of what the flower will give it. It's interested in the flower because what is attracted to flowers. And so they are called in Britain bee grabbers, or we call them, they're thick-headed flies is what we call them, but they actually grab wasps and bees, pry open their abdomen, lay an egg inside, and then let them go. And their larva, their maggot, develops inside the bee as a parasite. Wedge-shaped beetles, you might not even think this is a beetle. You see, but it's actually does have these really short elytra. So this is one that would be very confusing, I think, to most people. I love insects, of course, so I know about this group, and I was super excited to see this one in action. But this is actually a beetle. It's actually closely related to that beetle I showed on the beetle title slide. It's a wedge-shaped beetle. But here you can see it's not interested in the flower for pollen or nectar. It's actually laying eggs in the flower. And what happens is this beetle, it's a hyperparasite of mostly of solitary bees. And so the eggs hatch, these little larvae are mobile. They grab onto a bee that comes to the flower, ride it back to its nest, and then feed on the larvae and the stored products that the bee has worked hard to get. You got crab spiders and other spiders are very abundant on these flowers, waiting for prey to come by, as are ambush bugs, which blend in very wonderfully to the flowers. They're very interesting insects, like little praying mantises. They've got these raptorial front legs, even though they're a type of assassin bug. And so they grab insects. And here you can see, for instance, both of those groups feeding on pollinators. So this is a nymph of a jagged ambush bug feeding on a sweat bee. It's jabbing it in the neck to suck, to kill it and suck it dry. And here's a crab spider with a bee as its food. So, that's a very quick way to go over what the different groups you're going to see out there and how to define them. There are lots of different things that are very confusing. There are lots of things that might have certain characters but not others. It's difficult sometimes. So there are ways you can both reference and use these two resources, bugguide.net and inaturalist.org, to both review and kind of practice on identifying insects. And or you can upload your photos if you're not sure, and people will help you identify what they are. I would say iNaturalist has a much more active community, but both are very good resources for helping you identify things. And of course, I am here at the Plant Disease and Insect Clinic to help you identify things too. So as long as I don't get too many, if you got something that's really weird, you're just not really sure exactly what it is, and you're really curious, I'd be happy to take a look at some photos. You can email them to me, and I will let you know what you got there. But with that, I'm going to wrap it up and ask if we have any questions.
Thank you so much, Matt. One question came in just to us directly, and that is, what's the best time of day to observe these pollinators?
That's a great question. So I will say that insects are kind of like us. They don't like the heat as much as the cooler times. So, but I would say you're gonna have activity all day. Um, at night too, you may have things like moths coming to them. So I would not discount going out at night as well and with a flashlight and seeing what's out there. There's a lot of insects that are kind of afraid to come out during the day and will gladly come out at night. Also, the conditions are better. It's a little cooler. Obviously, it's dark. So I don't know what the whole kind of directions are for when you should be going out to do this, but I guarantee, if the flowers are open and kind of active, different flowers, some flowers do close at night or close during the day, depending on what their pollinators are and what they want to attract. But as long as the flowers are open and attractive, you're probably going to find things all day long and even through the night.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, and with the census, it's flexible for people to observe any time of day that they choose. And so that might be actually quite interesting. What did you see at a certain time? And what did your neighbor or your friend see at a different time? Or do two little 15-minute periods on the same, plant during the day. Another question coming in is, someone has found leaf-footed bugs on cucumber and squash plants. Should they treat those as pollinators or as a bug seeking to feed on their plant? That could be a philosophical question.
Yeah, I think if it's on a flower, you could probably consider a pollinator. If it's on the fruit, obviously they're there for the fruit. So maybe it's just if it's on a flower. If it's not, again, I don't know the complete rules of the whole census. But yeah, they will come to flowers. I have some photos of leaf-footed bugs on thistles, feeding on it. Now, I will say that often, here's another thing too. Sometimes if the flower has now produced fruit or seed, it still looks like a flower, but it's really more in the reproductive stage. There will be insects like those leaf-footed bugs that will come and feed on the actual developing seeds, not on the actual pollen. So it may be confusing when you see something on that. So if it's a very fresh, active flower, there's probably something coming to the nectar. And again, nectar is very attractive to a lot of insects because it's a quick sugar water kind of injection into their veins and kind of get out there and do their thing.
Excellent answer.
They don't have veins, by the way.
True. Yeah, that's great though, to help us think about the fact that the flower is changing over time, and yeah, some things are interested in the developing fruit. That's wonderful to know.
Yeah.
Okay, that seems to be everything that's come in for right now. And Charlotte's just reminding us that, you know, if we get a rainy day, that's why the census is built to be over a couple of different days, 23rd and 24th of August. So just observe the next day or later in the day if you're having a rainy time at where you're at. And from that, I think, have you and Mike decided that he will do BOLOs first, or will you roll right in? We're giving you a break, Matt, or are we making you?
I don't know. I'll ask Mike. We
Okay,
actually didn't
all
even
right.
talk about it. So, Mike, what do you think? What would you like to do?
Either way,
Oh
if you
gosh.
wanna, maybe we can give people some variety, spice of life, and all that good stuff. And
Yeah.
I'll talk for a little. As interesting as what you had to say was, though, I mean, that was really, even as a non-entomologist, that was cool.
Thanks.
All right, now I'm a little bit of a disadvantage here. The computer from which I usually broadcast is has gone to the big electronic recycling bin in the sky, and I am operating from the clinic itself, which means I don't have the dual screen. So I'm going to do my best to make this work.
We can appreciate that complexity. If you don't have dual screens, it's tricky to present. So thank you for getting that going, Mike. All right, looks good.
All right, be on the lookouts now for late July into late August in the disease realm. And first of all, a couple that aren't diseases, but that you are likely to see. You'll probably recognize the dark fungal material on leaf surfaces and maybe on cars and other inanimate objects. That is sooty mold. So this is just the growth of secondary fungi on honeydew. Usually it's on honeydew, occasionally from plant exudates that are, dripping onto these leaves from either higher in the canopy of the same plant or from other overstory trees. And you can diagnose that quite easily by rubbing on it. And if it comes off easily and leaves a green tissue below, then you know that that's what you're dealing with. So if for some reason this is something that people want to control, it's the management needs to be directed at the insect pest instead of the fungus. Another thing that will be popping up now that it's raining again is going to be the dog vomit slime mold in mulched beds, typically in the well, it can be any time in the growing season, really. And it'll start out, and Matt has a great picture of this, looking like a frothy yellow mass. And then as it ages, it starts to fade a little bit and eventually develops this pink crust with inside the dark spores that blow around and complete the life cycle. A very interesting life cycle that these have, but something that you're commonly encountering in the mulched beds. There are other types of slime molds that you'll likely find as well, less commonly, and but more inconspicuously. There are beautiful things when you get up and look at them up close, and you may be getting questions about those too, such probably especially Physarum in, say, turf grasses or on other plants. But these do no harm. They're not damaging the plant or the environment anyway. In our flowers and ground covers, there are quite a few things that will start to happen with the late summer that we're getting into. Of course, on our annual vinca, the Catharanthus, the Madagascar periwinkle, we have to be on the lookout for Phytophthora, both as an aerial blight, as you see in the photograph here on the right, and as a root rot. So you may see some yellowing and some wilting first, then leading to the eventual death of the plant. So that's the real Achilles heel of this plant. Although it will occasionally also get a Rhizoctonia aerial blight that's easier to, well, it's possible to distinguish those by whether or not the leaves are matted together. With Rhizoctonia, the fungal mycelium will actually make those leaves kind of mat together, which does not happen with Phytophthora. Volutella blight and Pachysandra, you see down here in the photograph at the bottom, especially on Pachysandra that is under some stress, and you get these large dark blotches, often with sort of concentric markings in them. Rudbeckia and our black-eyed Susan, septoria leaf spot will be quite common. You may even occasionally encounter some downy mildew. Zinnia, the leaf spots and petal spots by the fungus alternaria or the bacterium Xanthomonas may be out there. And of course, powdery mildews on many hosts, such as the Coreopsis down there in the bottom photograph. Moving on to the trees and shrubs. In the category of multiple hosts, we talked quite a bit last session about the heat and drought stress. And then thankfully the rains came and the temperatures mitigated a little bit, but you may still see something like that. I've seen some already defoliation where the river birches are dropping leaves from the heat. So check the previous PPP recording for some of the things about heat and drought symptoms. At any time, you may see trees suffering from having been improperly planted too deeply, or they're J-rooted, have girdling roots and so forth. So keep that in mind as bad management practices, even quite back in the past, that can contribute to the symptoms today. And Phytophthora and armillaria root rots can show up at any time of year. Specifically, a comment about flowering cherry, we'll start to see shot hole on this particular type of plant and leaves dropping off as we move into the later summer. And it's not fall defoliation, it's because of the disease presence. And flowering cherries also tend to decline and die due to multiple factors that we can't always even identify. With our oaks, bacterial leaf scorch, as you see the photograph here, the typical symptom, necrosis around the edge of the leaf with a kind of marbled sort of pattern of different colors along the leading edge. I'm going to go hopefully after this talk and check out one of our trees that we know is infected here on campus and see if it's showing symptoms yet. The redbud that we usually rely on to show symptoms, I haven't seen it do it, but this is about the time it should be starting. And we also may start to see Tubacia leaf spot on our oaks, as well as slime flux, which we talked about, I think recently, well, maybe not, but the efflux of a slimy fermented sort of liquid coming out of cracks and wounds, usually low on the tree and attracting a lot of different insects. Finally, of course, for our trees and shrubs, keep in mind that powdery mildews are going to be out there. Flowering dog we've talked about in the past. Viburnum, I just added that to the list today based on a sample I grabbed yesterday and gave to Swarna Moparthi, a colleague here in the clinic. That's the photograph on the bottom right. I think this variety is, they told me, spring bouquet, something like that. And you can see the powdery mildew there, another shot of it up close, kind of a fine coating there, and also see some of the discoloration of the leaf that's happening as well. Euonymus, saucer magnolia, leucotherian tulip poplar can get powdery mildew as well, but in a sort of a different type of look, and we've mentioned that one in the past, or those two. In our fruit trees, apples, you may see some of these leaf spots that look a little bit like the black spot on rose with the irregular margins, and it turns out that that is actually a relative of the black spot pathogen and causing what's called Marsanina leaf blotch. On the fruits of the apples, you may have bitter rot, shown this photograph here of a very large spot of decay on the apple, as well as sooty blotch and fly speck, which are superficial, just up on the very surface layers of the fruit, like here, this fly speck. With grapes, bunch grapes, black rot is a fungal disease of the fruit, and of course, downy mildew on the leaves can occur on fruit clusters as well. With the muscadines, it turns out that the black rot, the same fungus, causes a leaf spot. And either type of grape, you can get Pierce's disease caused by Xylella fastidiosa, the same bacterium that causes our bacterial leaf scorch on the trees. And finally, with peaches, brown rot and scab. Brown rot, of course, coming in as the fruits are maturing and leading to extensive decay and mummification of the fruit, so that you probably won't want to eat it. With our tomatoes, help, you may get a call. My tomato is wilting. I water it and it's still wilting and it's dying and drying up. So what kind of things would you think about? Yeah, we're pretty good on time. So I might just say, does anybody want to put in the chat what they might hypothesize would be the problem in a case like this. Okay. Late blight, southern. I'm not sure what southern tomato blight is, but I think I have an idea. Inconsistent water. All right. Initial overwatering. Yeah, I'm not sure. I suppose that certainly could happen if you get root rots coming in from excess watering initially. But the big ones that we think of in terms of diseases, or at least I would find worth listing, would be these. And someone or another got most of these. So fusarium wilt, and that is actually what this particular tomato had, a fungal disease on tomatoes, particularly on the heirloom tomatoes that don't have any resistance. Not that all resistance is going to be good, though, against all races of the fungus, but something that's more likely to affect you if you do have heirlooms. And we've seen several cases this year in the clinic on tomato. Southern bacterial wilts, also coming up from the soil, persistent in the soil, getting in the vascular system there of the xylem and causing this wilting. And with any of these wilts, you may start to see the initial symptoms of wilting that don't seem permanent. Yeah, I think it's probably fair to say that you may, at least with some of these anyway, get recovery as the cooler time of the day comes on, and then again wilting again the next day, but they eventually progress to a permanent wilt and death of the plant. Root knot nematodes, of course, something that you can, in tomato anyway, they tend to be very large and visible to the unaided eye if you dig up those roots and look at them. Not the nematodes themselves, but the galls. Tomato spotted wilt virus, which, as the name implies, causes leaf spots as well. That may be the primary symptom you're noticing, but as the name also implies, there can be wilting involved. And southern stem blight, which is, I think, what the comment in the chat may have been geared toward, which is another fungus. Well, I don't even remember what the name has been changed to now. Sclerotium rolfsii, and then Athelia rolfsii, and now it's something else, but it still ends in rolfsii, so we'll just call it that. And that is not the entire exhaustive list of what can happen with tomatoes when they're wilting, but at least a set of 5 things to consider as possibilities. Other problems in the vegetable garden that may be coming on now with our beans, both anthracnose and Cercospora leaf spot, 2 different fungal diseases. With cucurbits, downy mildew, which has showed up now in the state as of last month. And powdery mildew, a recurring problem, especially on the squash and pumpkin. You can also see it on this gourd here in the photo on the right. And with tomato, leaf spots such as bacterial spot, septoria leaf spot, very common, and gray leaf spot caused by the fungus Stemphylium. More of a, at least I consider that one, in my experience, and more of a late season type of leaf spot versus the septoria that can come on a little earlier. Early blight, late blight is pretty uncommon in our tomato vegetable garden. It's been a long time since we've seen that in the clinic on a homegrown tomato, but something to keep in mind. And of course, the wilts, like we mentioned before, and growth cracks. Now that the water has come back and the fruits start to expand, we may see some things like growth cracks and cat facing. And just a couple of links there about 2 of those particular diseases there, the downy mildew and cucurbits and the late blight. Turf grasses, I always give the disclaimer that I'm not qualified to talk about them, but I do anyway. I get information from Lee Butler, who is very qualified to talk about them. But now that we're in the warm season, when the cool season grasses like fescue and ryegrass are under stress, we'll be seeing brown patch caused by Rhizoctonia. And in the warm season grasses, when they're stressed by the cooler weather, then we can see large patch, which you see a photograph of there in the lower left. Any kind of turf grass any time of year can get fairy rings. Gray leaf spot shown in the photographs on the upper right is another problem that may occur on certain species of turf. This is not the same fungus that causes the gray leaf spot on the tomatoes, however. It's completely different. Summer patch on Kentucky bluegrass and fine fescue, and rust, which with a hand lens you could diagnose yourself on multiple turf species. If that's not enough, it's a rainy afternoon, you're not able to get outside and work in the garden, you can look up more BOLOs on our website in the menu item on the left. With that, I will stop sharing and see if there are any questions in the chat.
Thank you, Mike. So far, no questions just yet. So we'll let Matt get transitioned to his side of things. Some great pictures there of the transition of the dog vomit slime molds. That was quite good because people see that at all different stages. So that was great to have all on one slide.
Yeah, well, Matt's gearing up. One time when my son was small, we were at an ice cream shop somewhere down, I think it was in the Wilmington area, and there was some out there, and he asked if he could touch it, and I said sure, and pokes his finger in it, so it's not a problem.
Fun for all ages.
Real life experiences there. Okay. Well, everyone, I'm going to talk to you about some arthropod BOLOs for late July and August. So let's start off again with something we mentioned before. The cicada killers and cicadas are still out, so you're probably hearing them, or hopefully maybe you're seeing the cicada killer wasps. Some people calling worried about them in their lawns or areas of the yard, but I say they're really neat native wasp, and if you have a site for them and you don't mind it being not very covered with grass or holes in it for part of the year, then maybe leave them be. And maybe feel bad a little bit for the cicadas that they're hunting, but also know that that's the circle of life here in North Carolina. There are going to be a lot of large caterpillars being seen soon because a lot of these caterpillars that have one generation per year were emerging a month or two ago, feeding, and they are building up all this body mass to pupate and then emerge as a moth next year. So you're going to have some of the prominents, the oakworms, and then some of the giant silkworm moths. And maybe you'll be lucky enough to see one of these hickory horn devils that is bigger than your hand almost, and one of the largest caterpillars in the world. So they're around, they're going to be out, so take a look out for them. Of course, there's also going to be garden caterpillars too. So parsley worms. My mom actually sent me a picture of her. I think it was dill, maybe parsley, that was completely ravaged by them. But of course, these grow up to be black swallowtail butterflies. So if you can sacrifice some of your herbs for them, they'll be very happy and they will turn into butterflies. Of course, you don't want to sacrifice your squash to the squash vine borers. And there's going to be a lot of other insects out there, a lot of other caterpillars on the crops in your gardens. So be on the lookout for hornworms in your tomatoes, armyworms sometimes in your tomatoes and other plants. Look for frass and other evidence of them chewing. And if it's a small enough garden, you can hand pick them off. Otherwise, you can use some pesticides. But sometimes just a little bit of leaf feeding will develop these really interesting insects and won't really damage your crops or kind of get rid of all the stuff you want to eat. This is also the time of year when you're going to start to begin to see full-grown mantises and garden spiders and other things like that. People are going to start to see more orb weavers in general. That's because like those caterpillars, they were small before, they were out, but they didn't reach their full size until the midsummer and fall. And so you may start noticing these. And if you're wondering where were they before, it's just they were small or they were eggs earlier in the year. Now, of course, the social wasp nests are getting bigger. So if you have a yellow jacket problem in your yard and it's in an area where you're, going by and you're worried about getting stung or other people are, it's probably a good time to treat before it gets bigger and bigger by the end of the summer. But a lot of other wasps are really out there being active on the flowers, like we discussed already, and hunting for their prey or feeding their young, whatnot. And of course, this time of year, all bets are off for what you might see. So just about anything can be out there. Lots and lots of other arthropod activity. You may see a mantid fly if you're lucky. We saw some light sheet a week or two ago. You know, if you're hibiscus, you might have these bugs on it. These scentless plant bugs. There's lots of things out there. But just to put in a plug for a couple specifics. So keep an eye out for spotted lanternflies and Joro spiders. Joro spiders we're expecting in different parts of the state. I mentioned them recently. I think I talked to you all about them a couple months ago, or maybe it was last month I mentioned it. But spotted lanternfly, we're always on the lookout for new areas. It is now established in Kernersville, around Kernersville. So if you're seeing them there, that's not very surprising. If you're seeing them other places in North Carolina, definitely report them to us or the North Carolina Department of Agriculture. We are looking for active populations, new ones. It's not we don't expect that we're going to be free of them forever in the whole state, but we want to continue to slow the invasion down. So if you see them, let us know, and we'll have somebody on the case. And finally, I've been getting a lot of calls about this, but be on the lookout for flatworms. But actually don't. You don't have to really be on the lookout for them. That's actually a misconception I'll tell you about in a second. But because of the rains recently, I've been getting a few calls about people seeing lots of flatworms in the yard, especially the hammerhead worms like this one. This is Bipalium cuensi, which is one of the more common ones. It's got a few thick and thin stripes on the back and a broken collar around the neck. So these you may find out and about when it rains a lot of arthropods, worms, snails, things like that, slugs get saturated. The soil is very saturated. They can drown. They can't survive underwater, so they're going to start to be pushed out, just like earthworms are out on the pavement when after a big rain. These things will be more abundant when it's raining. It's much easier for them to crawl around because it's so moist everywhere. So one thing to note is that we are not specifically looking for reports of flatworms or hammerhead worms, especially ones that are already here. And in fact, we have on our fact sheet, I have a link to this page on iNaturalist. This is all of the flatworm species that have been identified in North Carolina so far on iNaturalist. And so if you're not sure, look at this page. If you're still not quite sure, I'd be interested in knowing about it. The NCDA would probably be interested in knowing, or you know, colleagues, people would be interested in knowing about it. But really, many of these things are non-native and have been here for years or decades and have probably already done the ecological impact that they will. There's really nothing you can do to get rid of them, and they're really not harmful to you or your pets or anything like that, even though there's news online about them being toxic or carrying parasites. Those are really only if you eat them, so don't eat them. So really, they're just kind of an oddity, and there's something that people kind of get a little worked up about, but really out there, we expect to have some species out there, and they can be more or less abundant year to year and in site to site. So you may have a lot in your yard this year and maybe none next year. But, you know, of course, we're always looking out for new things. And in fact, this one, I'm happy to say I'm on a paper that is about to be published. It's in press. But this one, I sent some photos to an expert online. They said it was, when we go back, it was Obama Nungara, which there are darker forms than this. But really, what I did was, okay, and so I sent this off to federal agencies to identify, to confirm, because this was a suspected new flatworm in the state. They sent it off to a French researcher who then did dissections and molecular work on it. And we found out, or he found out, that this is actually a brand new species to science. And so this will be coming out soon. So yeah, be on the lookout for them. But I would say if it's something we have, just know that I'll probably say, oh, well, it's been here for a while. Thank you for letting us know. But for now, we're not doing anything about it. And so with that, I will stop my sharing and answer any questions.
Wow, first we have to say congratulations, Matt. Now do you get to name it? Do you get to be have something Bertonii? Come on.
No, no, the fly, I mean, so the flatworm experts got to name it. They did all the work. I just took the photos. They included me on the publication because I'm the one who kind of collected the specimens, sent a lot of photos, and had some information on them. But this type specimen is from Lennar, North Carolina. So
Wow.
that's, so that's where this species, no matter where it's found around the world, the name-bearing specimen is from here in North Carolina now.
Wow.
And I sent them a lot of specimens, and yeah. So unfortunately, because I'm not the taxonomist, and which is fine because I don't work on worms, I would never know how to describe a new species or recognize it in these worms unless it was super distinct, because they require a lot of dissections and histology and weird things to identify them. But so the worm researchers will have their name on it because each species, if you've ever seen this online, when you write a species name, oftentimes there's another name next to it, and that's the name of the describer, the author of that species. And so I actually have a couple of species my name is on. Nobody's ever named anything after me. And so they name this. I don't think it'll ruin anything because there are some weird things about taxonomy. Say if we had just submitted this paper and then I put it up on the screen, technically, because I showed you a picture of the specimen and the name, it would not count anymore and it could ruin things. But I think we're fine because it's in press. But it's going to be called Amaga pseudobama, because because it looks a lot like Obama Nungara. Now, people are probably laughing. Obama is actually the name given by locals in South America, where that genus is from, for leaf. It means leaf, and so that's why leaf animal kind of thing. So it's not named after our former president. This is it's because of the native language where these flatworms are from. We don't know exactly where this flatworm is from originally, but technically it is now the type specimen, the type species is from North Carolina, but it's probably not likely. It's not likely from here, obviously, or we would have found it already. And we really don't have many native species of flatworms in North Carolina. Most of them are exotic. But it was very exciting to hear there was a new species, and they asked me to be on the paper, and very honored to
Yes.
be on a flatworm paper now.
Yes, and it's such an interesting process to be part of, and exciting, and it reinforces that we haven't discovered everything, animal or plants, and how
Yeah.
magical that is.
So yeah, so it looks like we've got some questions. So I'll go from the start. Looks like, okay, so what are views on mantises, friend or foe? Well, I mean, I myself wouldn't go out killing mantises just because, but they are generalist predators. So they can be a friend if they're feeding on pests that you don't want. So that's fine, but they will feed on anything that they can grab, and that means it could be anything from, pests to bees to hummingbirds, rodents, things like that, lizards. So, I would say mantises, they're out there. I think they're just doing what they're doing. The next question is, I thought NCDA was able to eradicate in Kernersville for spotted lanternfly. That is incorrect as far as I know. So it has not been eradicated. It has been pushed back heavily. I think they've had a really successful program there to keep the population down, but I guarantee you they are not eradicated. That's basically, it's almost impossible. Once an insect has been established in a big area, it's very difficult to impossible to eradicate. And once it starts to spread from there, basically there's no eradicating this pest anyway, because it's so well established in the US that we're going to be with it forever. Unless there was some kind of disease that wiped out every single individual, which is not going to happen. It's here forever. So really, it's just kind of fighting the back a bit. Joro spiders should be reported but left alone, right? Yeah, I mean, so Joro spiders, they don't need to be reported. We're aware that they're going to be around because they are, again, now also well established in Georgia, and this is another species that we will be living with forever again. But they are beautiful. They are kind of scary to people if you're really scared of big spiders, but I will say they're harmless. They're very docile. They do make a lot of webbing. I think the nuisance factors could be the most important one, but luckily they're really only active and making huge webs for only a couple months of the year, basically mid to late summer through fall, and then they die off. Their eggs hatch the next year, and then they're very small spiderlings until they until the end of the summer when they start to develop larger and mature. I did actually write a news item on our website. Let me link that real quick. So I have been getting some questions about people thinking they found Joro spiders, but it's actually some of our native relatives, the relatives of the Joro spider. And so I tried to clarify some of those things. I just dropped that in the chat link for that. Okay, let's see. Should you squish hammerhead worms? Only if you want to. I guess if you feel like it, it's not going to be doing anything. Actually, I would say don't squish them, because as soon as you squish one and you break them apart, that makes more worms, because each body segment will make a new worm. So really you're multiplying them then. It's actually helping them reproduce. You can kill them, you can destroy them in other ways, but really I would say it's only if you really want to. You're not doing anything. You're not going to be really getting rid of the population. And really, they've been here for a long time, so I wouldn't worry about it. How to deal with slugs? That is a difficult one. We do actually have a session we had, I think, last year on slugs and snails that has some good information. Oh, thanks for the congratulations on my new worm. It won't be my new worm necessarily, but it's I feel like I'm partly responsible for it. Not bringing it here, but figuring out what it is. We have large quantities of dead earthworms on the grass and driveways. We've used no chemicals in our lawn. Really, it depends. Oftentimes right now, especially with the rains, again, these animals can't breathe in water, and especially if you're in the Piedmont or the clay soils, it gets very saturated. Basically, these things can start to drown, and so that drives the worms up to the surface. They can breathe. Unfortunately, this is what happens. They often get stuck on driveways or somewhere where then it's very difficult. Once it does dry out and starts to get hot, they dry out very quickly. So it's a balancing act for them to be moist enough to survive, but not drowning in water. And so, in fact, this is where you can sometimes kill worms for study, is to drown them in water so they are extended. They don't kind of shrivel up or anything like that. So yeah, it's most likely, if it was after the rains, that's almost certainly what it is. They're coming out to get air and to get out of the water, but if they don't get back into the ground, they're going to dry out and die. Let's see. Okay, some congratulations. I thank you all for that. And what camera do I use? Okay, so I use a Canon SLR with a macro lens, and but really the lighting is really what's important too. So I use a flash, a diffused flash. Maybe at some point I'll talk about photography in one of the sessions. Let's see. What to do about stick bugs? Some actually spit. Yes. So we do have a species of stick insect. Anisomorpha is the genus. It is common on it can be somewhat common on the coast. It's a little bit thicker, and it's called a striped stick insect. It's got stripes down its back. It's often a dark color with the light pale stripes. They do actually have a defensive mechanism where they have little glands on their thorax, and they have these little spigots, and they basically spray out a really noxious fluid that kind of aerosolizes, and they spray it toward the eyes of predators. Actually, the first time I found out about this was at a friend's house. He was keeping a baby one of them just for fun, just random whim. And he said when he went to go clean out the cage one day, he just like instantly blinded and was like really burning eyes and all this stuff. And he's like, "What the heck happened?" And he thought it might have been some kind of allergy or whatever. But we read online then very quickly that these do spray. Now, what to do about them? I don't know. They're probably susceptible to pesticides. They can be locally abundant, where you'll find a lot of mating pairs feeding on various bushes and kind of broadleaf plants. I'm sure there's some fact sheets out there, and I think if you can tolerate them, I think that spraying is from them is because they're feeling threatened. So if you get really up in their face, they may spray you, but most of the time you're pretty safe from them. Okay. So with that, I will I guess be quiet unless anybody has any more questions.
That's wonderful, Matt. And we want to thank you especially for today's presentation And as Charlotte said, you know, we benefit so much from your photos that are exceptional, and to be able to show us those little tiny parts and the features that you look at is just really interesting, and it gives us an appreciation of that complexity that is there in a microscopic view.
Thanks.
So thank you for
Yeah,
that.
that's-
Well done.
I love looking at it too. So it's I would still take them even if nobody else looked at them. I'd look at them all the time too, because I really enjoy seeing them up close. So, you know, I like, you know, getting them magnified and seeing all those little structures, because that's what I like, the variety of all of them. So
Yeah, amazing.
yeah.
Thank you. All right, I get to bring us home with Master Gardener program announcements. And certainly the one that we're most excited about is that Extension Master Gardener College registration is now open. We have gotten to that point where our registration is open and you can start to sign up to come and join us in Raleigh, September 24th to 26th for Extension Master Gardener College 2024. We have the theme of growing healthy plants, pollinators, and people, and we have a fantastic lineup for you that is all confirmed and ready to go. And what I'd like to do is actually show you the Master Gardener website, the Master Gardener College website, excuse me, so that you can see what we prepared for you and where to find everything. So this is our homepage for Master Gardener College 2024. And you can see we've got all the links right up top for the information that you need. We have prepared a wonderful registration guide for you, and I'd like to show you that. But let me take you through. First, if we went to the schedule page, this is where you can get an overview of what the few days looks like. And as I said, right here at the top, we've prepared for you a registration guide. This is a document that opens in a different tab. It's a Google Doc, and it is got all the details in terms of not only information on how to register, but I'm going to scroll us down to tell you that it really goes into detail about each of the sessions. So on Tuesday, September 24th, we're offering optional pre-conference workshops. And so these are being taken place across the state. We have one happening in the Wilson area, one in Raleigh, and one in Asheboro. So this description is here for you to really get a feeling for what those tours and workshops would be about. And then for the main conference, we have 2 days, Wednesday, September 25th, and Thursday, September 26th. And this registration guide, again, takes you through session by session, so you can see who the speakers are, what their talks will be about, and just the entire timeline. So as you are looking at things, and this is important to review because there's going to be some times when you need to choose between some concurrent workshops. So if I take you back to the schedule page here, you're going to see that on both Wednesday afternoon, you're going to choose one of the workshops to attend. And then again on Thursday afternoon, you're going to choose a tour or a workshop to spend a bulk of your day. So when it comes time to register, you're going to want to have thought through which sessions do you want to go to, because we're going to ask you to choose. On the registration page, here we have all the information about cost and how to register. Now, since this college is open to certified Master Gardener volunteers and extension professionals, our actual registration link is on the EMG intranet. That's how we are able to ensure that the conference is open to you all. It's not open to the general public. So although the general public can see this page, excuse me, can see this page with the information on it, when it comes time to register, you're going to click on this link. It's going to take you to the EMG intranet, and that's where you're going to actually register. As I said, you've got the registration guide I just showed you to look through, and all the information that you need about what the registration fee includes. We also have prepared for you a couple different spots that I'm going to take you to, One of them here is information on hotels and dining and area information. So you're gonna make your own hotel arrangements for staying overnight in Raleigh. We have gotten 3 different hotels to give us room blocks with special rates for Master Gardener volunteers. All those good details are here. Also, we talk about what is included in your registration fee in terms of dining, and then some other places you might consider eating when you're in town, since you will be doing breakfast and dinner on your own. And lastly, one of our wonderful volunteers has put together a list of not only the nearby restaurants, but some other fun things you might do when you're in Raleigh. Local shops, nurseries, gardens to visit, and some conveniences that you might want to know about. In terms of logistics, we have got everything you need to know about parking and directions on this page. You are required to buy a parking permit to attend EMG College and park on NC State Centennial campus. It's just one of those things that we all are required to pay for parking on campus. So this is going to walk you through how to purchase that permit and be ready to park on campus for the conference, as well as directions, just exactly where the parking deck is, where exactly the conference is taking place, and as well as information that you might need regarding handicap parking. Okay, and the 2 other spots that we have here on the website include our sponsorship page. This was one of my other announcements, is that we're still looking for sponsors to help us with the cost of running the college. So if you are aware of someone who might be a potential sponsor, please reach out to us by sending an email to ncemgprogram@ncsu.edu, and we will reach out to that sponsor. This is also a great opportunity for Extension Master Gardener groups or associations who might like to make a donation at this time. And then finally, we are so pleased this year to be able to offer some scholarships for Extension Master Gardener volunteers who might be otherwise unable to attend the conference. And so we are still able to receive applications for scholarships. So please consider that if it applies to you. All right, I'm going to take us back now to our few other announcements for the month ahead. All right, I talked all about sponsorship, so we'll move on from that one. All right, this is an announcement that we wanted to share with you. All of you are aware of the plant toolbox and many of the wonderful photos that are already on the plant toolbox, which, just to remind you, those are available for you to use in your teaching and training. But many cultivars don't yet have good photos or photos at all. So we are being asked as a community to help gather good photos that could be uploaded onto the plant toolbox. And actually, Scott, who's the manager of the plant toolbox, has cultivated, or rather curated, a list of specific photos they're looking for. So take a look at this link, and maybe you've got these plants in your garden and you can take some photos for us. It is important to know that when you provide a photo to the plant toolbox, you're basically giving it a Creative Commons license, which means that you are going to be credited as the photographer, but that you are accepting the fact that others can use the photo for presentations or training or plant labels and things like that. So take a look at that. Speaking of photos, this is the time when we get to upload our own photos of plant pest and disease issues that we're seeing in our own gardens, or maybe in the demonstration garden or your neighbor's garden. In August every year, Matt and Mike offer to diagnose our concerns and our issues. We get to ask the experts. So that's going to happen next month. That's what our August Plants, Pests and Pathogens is all about. We get to ask the experts. And the way that works is we ask you to submit photos with your questions in advance. And then Matt and Mike prepare the responses. So it's time to submit those photos. Thank you to some of you that have already done that. And I prepared a Google form. That's the photo submission form for you to enter your information, tell us a little bit about the question, and upload your photos. Now, it is important to know that to do this, you do need to have a Google account. So for example, if you have a Gmail address, you have a Google account and you can upload to this form. If for some reason you don't have a Google account, those are free and easy to get. And I have a link here on how you can get a Google account. And we're gonna ask that you get this in by Friday, August 9th. That gives Matt and Mike a couple of weeks to prepare their answers in their presentation for us. And this is my last slide, which tells you what is coming up next month. And again, it's asking the experts. I do want to remind you that we will have next month's Plants, Pests, and Pathogens on August 27th, but then we will not have Plants, Pests, and Pathogens in September. We hope instead to see you all at Extension Master Gardener College, September 24th through 26th. I will make a plug that both Matt and Mike are leading sessions during the conference. So that will be wonderful to have them in person. Meet the stars, we could call it. And then we will regroup for the last Plants, Pests, and Pathogens of 2024 in October, on October 22nd. And on that day, Matt and Mike wrap the season up for us with a fun game that they prepare called Critter or Not. And so with that, I thank you for your attendance today. And we thank Matt again for his presentation and Mike always for his be on the lookouts. So happy gardening, and please take a look at that Master Gardener College website, and we hope you can join us in September. Thank you, everybody.